Princess Kate is right that many amateur photographers bring their photos into Photoshop and tidy up. And I think probably what she did is one of these best take like montages where she took a series of photos and she wanted to get the smiling face just right for all the kids and herself, and did a little montaging, and then it invariably leaves a few artifacts. And so I was pretty confident at that point that this was fairly benign. I understood why the AP pulled it because they have very particular standards. But I don't think it was nefarious. I don't think it's a sign that she's dead. I don't think aliens have taken over her body and all the crazy nonsense that the internet is coming up with. I think this is a classic story of photo editing that was a slightly sloppy. At the end of the day, this is a pretty simple story. But what's interesting about it is even though this is a story about Photoshop and fairly benign photo editing, there is the shadow of AI. Like if we weren't living in the generative AI age, I don't think you'd be hearing much of what we are hearing. Yeah. I do think that the reason why these conspiracies can take hold is because we do live at a time where somebody could have fully fabricated that image. Or that was a body double and then they replaced her face there. And so this is still an AI story to some degree, but I think it really is quite innocuous. We are seeing two things. One is people are creating fake images, fake audio, fake video of Trump, of Biden, of Harris, and trying to use that to damage them. But they're also doing something else, which is they're using the specter of deep fakes to try to dismiss reality, right? Because if you live in this world where anything can be fake, well, the video of Trump stumbling on his words and calling his wife Mercedes, he can just say it's fake. So that's actually very dangerous also, is you can deny reality when things can be fake. And I think you're seeing both of those around the election. And of course, we're seeing the awful content around non-consensual sexual imagery. We saw it with Taylor Swift, but high school girls every day are now being victims of this. Journalists, human rights activists, politicians, people who attract unwanted attention are being victims of being inserted into explicit material. People are using it to create child sexual abuse material. People are using it to commit small to large scale frauds. Getting phone calls from what seems like your loved ones, or talking to your CEO, but it's not. It's actually somebody who's faking them. So you're seeing really significant weaponization at the individual level, at the societal level, and at the democracy level. And I think it's probably a sign of things to come. Individuals have to stop pretending that they can forensically analyze content and be reliable at it. You can't. This is a really hard job. I do this for a living. It's hard. So what you have to realize as a consumer is that you are vulnerable and you are not going to be able to forensically analyze your way out of this. I think we just need to be more thoughtful about how we consume information and understand that the journalists have a serious job. And by the way, when they get it wrong, there are consequences. And you can't say that about the knuckleheads on Twitter. There's no consequence for them. The first approach is what we call reactive approach. I wait for the reporter from the Telegraph or BBC to contact me. They send me the photograph. I run a battery of tests, try to figure out what's going on. I let them know. They set the record straight. Meanwhile, an entire news cycle has gone by, right? So it's a relatively slow process. We measure that in hours or days. But at the speed of the internet, that doesn't really work. So the proactive technique is that the camera itself. So Princess Kate's camera, when she took that photo, would have said, this photo was taken on this date and time at this location. This is a credential that authenticates that. And then as she put that into Photoshop, Photoshop would say, okay, this is what I did to the photo, bing, 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 bing. And then when that goes to the AP can look at that content credential. It's a manifest, we call it, and say, okay, this is what happened. This is consistent with our photo editing standards, or it is not. We will accept it and we will not. And none of this would have happened, right? If that existed. And the nice thing about the proactive techniques is you're there at the point of creation. Yeah. And as long as those credentials are there, we get to make decisions. Yeah. Now, the drawback is we need those contra credentials in some 10 billion devices around the world, and we need the infrastructure. And so that's going to take a little bit of time. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a combination of those two solutions, right? The credentials will work when people I think in this case, if that Canon camera and that version of Photoshop that Kate had were compliant, I think she wasn't trying to fool anybody. She was just editing her photo. Then it would have worked perfectly. A dedicated bad actor, yeah, they'll find a way around it. And then the reactive techniques that we talked about, that's where I come in. So a combination of those two is sort of what you need.